Martha Williams was 64 years old, a single mother who had spent her entire life sacrificing for her only son, David. For 36 years, she had worked double shifts, skipped vacations, and saved every spare dollar just to give him a better life. Every dream she had, every plan for herself, all of it had been quietly pushed aside so David could have more opportunities than she ever did. And today, standing at the edge of St. Matthew's Episcopal Church, Martha thought it had all been worth it. She wore the nicest dress she had ever owned, a soft navy blue gown with delicate beadings she had bought just for this day. Her silver hair was swept into a neat bun, and she had even splurged on professional styling for the first time in years. As she stepped inside the grand hall, the soft notes of the piano filled the air. Martha looked around, her heart swelling with pride and anticipation. "This is it," she whispered to herself. "David's big day. My little boy is finally starting his own family." But beneath her smile, there was something else, a quiet nervousness she couldn't shake. Would Brittany, her soon-to-be daughter-in-law, ever truly accept her? Would Martha finally feel like she belonged in this new family hope? Love. A fragile, tender longing to be seen and appreciated. Martha sat at table 12, tucked toward the back of the grand reception hall. She sipped her champagne, slowly watching her son David laugh at the head table, his face glowing with happiness. For a moment, her heart warmed. He looked so much like his father, she thought, letting herself breathe in the joy of the day. And then it happened. Brittany, her brand new daughter-in-law, glided toward her table. Her designer reception dress hugged her slim figure perfectly, her makeup flawless, her smile dazzling. It was the kind of smile that photographs love, perfectly rehearsed, perfectly staged. She leaned down just enough so only Martha could hear her voice dripping with sugary sweetness. "Martha, could you stand by the bathroom wall? You might ruin the photos with your age." For a second, Martha thought she had misheard. Her ears rang, her chest tightened, and the laughter around her seemed to fade into a hollow silence. Then she realized she had heard her perfectly. At that moment, time seemed to slow. Forks paused mid-air. Conversations died mid-sentence. From the next table, Mrs. Peterson's fork clinked against her plate, frozen in disbelief. Great Aunt Helen gasped loudly. A nearby guest turned to glance. But Brittany's smile never wavered. She straightened her posture as if nothing had happened, as if she hadn't just humiliated the woman who raised the man she married. Martha sat frozen, her heart pounding in her ears. The weight of 36 years, the late nights, the double shifts, the sacrifices, all collided into this single shattering moment. Hope dissolved into disbelief. Disbelief melted into pain. And beneath the pain, something darker stirred, a quiet, burning anger that sat deep in her chest. She whispered softly to herself, "After everything I've done, this is how I'm seen." Martha didn't say a word. Her hands trembled slightly, but her face remained calm, eerily calm. She rose slowly from her seat, feeling dozens of curious eyes following her every move. The laughter, the music, the clinking of glasses, they all faded into the background, replaced by a low, muffled hum inside her head. Step by step, she walked across the polished marble floor toward the gift table. Her navy dress brushed softly against her legs, and her heels clicked sharply with each step, a quiet, steady rhythm that somehow felt louder than the music. The white gift box sat among dozens of others, wrapped in elegant paper tied with a silver ribbon. Inside it were things that could have changed David and Brittany's lives forever: the deed to an oceanfront villa worth $2.8 million and a cashier's check for $3 million. Martha rested her fingertips on the smooth surface of the box, and for just a moment she hesitated. Her heart whispered, "This was supposed to be my blessing for them, my gift, my way of saying I love you." But then Brittany's voice echoed in her mind, "Stand by the bathroom wall, ruin the photos with your age." The hesitation vanished. Martha lifted the box, holding it close to her chest as if protecting something sacred. And then, without a word, without a glance backwards, she walked straight past the photographers, past the guests, past her son, who didn't even notice she was leaving. The heavy reception doors swung open, letting in the cool evening breeze. Martha stepped out into the quiet night, the muffled celebration fading behind her. For the first time in years, she felt something unexpected: power. Sometimes she thought silence is louder than any scream. She didn't know it yet, but this was the first step of her transformation, the moment Martha stopped being the quiet, invisible mother and became the woman who would never be underestimated again. 3 weeks before the wedding, Martha sat alone at her small kitchen table, staring at the numbers on her bank statement. $2.347.12. That was all she had left until the next Social Security check arrived. The soft hum of the old refrigerator filled the silence. A half-empty can of soup sat on the counter next to a sleeve of saltine crackers, tonight's dinner. Again, this had been her life for years now, stretching every dollar, choosing between new shoes or a bag of groceries, rationing electricity in the winter so she could afford her medication. Yet even in this quiet struggle, she never hesitated when it came to David. She had already paid for part of the catering deposit, contributed to the floral arrangements, and even helped cover the photographer's fee, all while quietly skipping meals to make her Social Security stretch. And then there was the gift. On a late night 2 months earlier, she had seen Brittany post a photo online of a stunning set of crystal wine glasses, the kind Martha could never afford for herself. Brittany had captioned it, "Dreaming of these for the wedding." So Martha made a decision. She dipped into the last of her savings and bought them. 2 weeks' worth of grocery money gone in an instant. When the delicate box arrived, Martha held it in her hands as if it were something sacred. "She'll love this," she whispered softly. "Maybe this will show her I want to be part of their family." The hope in her voice was almost heartbreaking, and yet beneath that quiet optimism, her life was weighed down by an invisible exhaustion. Years of sacrifice had left their marks, thinning hair-aching joints, the fine lines carved deep into her face. But despite it all, Martha carried herself with quiet grace, holding onto the simple belief that love and generosity would always be enough. She had no idea how wrong she was. It was 9:30 on a quiet Tuesday night, 3 weeks before the wedding. Martha stood in the fluorescent-lit aisle of Murphy's Corner Market, clutching a can of soup and a sleeve of saltine crackers. She counted the change in her hand carefully. Every penny mattered now. When she reached the counter, Tommy Murphy, the store clerk she'd known since he was a teenager, smiled faintly. "Evening, Mrs. Williams. Lottery is up to $62 million tonight. You want a ticket?" Martha almost laughed. $62 million. For someone who had been stretching to 347 to last the month, that number didn't even sound real. $62 million, huh? She murmured. That's a lifetime of groceries. But something inside her, maybe stubborn defiance, maybe fate, made her pause. She slid a $5 bill across the counter. "One ticket, quick pick." Tommy blinked in surprise but nodded, feeding the bill into the machine. The slip of paper printed out with 6 little numbers that Martha barely looked at before folding it carefully into her purse. 4 nights later, sitting in her tiny living room with the sound of her old radiator hissing in the corner, Martha turned on the TV. The lottery numbers flashed on the screen. 7, 14, 21 and 35, 47, Powerball 9. Her hand froze, gripping her tea mug so tightly it nearly slipped. She reached for her ticket, checked once, twice, a third time. Every single number matched. Martha Williams, the woman living on soup and crackers, the woman who had skipped meals to buy crystal wine glasses for her ungrateful future daughter-in-law, had just won $62 million. She sat there for a long time, silent, letting the weight of it sink in. For the first time in years, she didn't feel trapped. For the first time in decades, her life was truly her own. And yet she didn't call David. She didn't call Brittany. She told no one. Instead, she started to plan. 2 days later, Martha walked into the Springfield Lottery office, a dull government building that looked nothing like the life-changing place it was. After taxes, the lump sum came to $38.4 million, still more money than she could spend in 10 lifetimes. But Martha had a vision. At Henderson Real Estate, she founded a stunning oceanfront villa on Lighthouse Drive, floor-to-ceiling windows and infinity deck, in a view that looked like freedom. The asking price, $2.8 million, Martha bought it in cash. Then she walked into Pinnacle Bank and prepared a cashier's check for $3 million. Both the deed to the villa and the check went into an elegant white box, tied with a silver ribbon, the wedding gift that would have changed David and Brittany's lives forever. And Martha smiled softly to herself, believing foolishly perhaps that this was how she would finally be welcomed into their family. She had no idea that the gift she prepared with love would become the sharpest weapon she ever carried. The wedding was over. The music had faded, the champagne glasses emptied, and the white roses from the reception were already wilting in the trash bins outside St. Matthew's Church. For David and Brittany, life went back to normal, but for Martha Williams, nothing was normal anymore. The Monday after the wedding, Martha unlocked the door to her tiny studio apartment for what would be one of the last times. The space had served her for over a decade. One small room, a creaky twin bed, a kitchenette, and a single window that looked out onto a parking lot full of cracked asphalt. She glanced around the familiar walls bare except for an old photograph of David as a little boy holding a paper kite in the park. For years, this place had been her prison, a reminder of bills stacked on the counter, skipped meals, and nights spent worrying whether she could afford to keep the lights on. But now everything was different. 2 weeks later, Martha turned the brass key into the door of her new home, a luxury apartment on the fourth floor of Ocean View Towers, one of Springfield's most exclusive addresses. Floor-to-ceiling windows opened up to a breathtaking panorama of the harbor. Polished marble floors reflected the soft afternoon sunlight. The kitchen was sleek and modern, with an island big enough to host the holiday dinners she once dreamed of having. Martha stepped barefoot onto the balcony, the salty ocean breeze brushing against her face. From here, she could see sailboats gliding across the sparkling water. For the first time in decades, she took a deep, unhurried breath. This wasn't just an apartment. It was freedom. She didn't tell David. She didn't tell Brittany. They thought she was still living in her tiny studio, budgeting every penny and eating canned soup for dinner. And Martha let them believe it. She kept her biggest secret locked deep inside her chest, the oceanfront villa she had purchased in cash, and the fortune sitting quietly in her accounts. In public, she was still the quiet, modest widow who dressed simply and never flaunted wealth. But behind closed doors, she had begun something entirely new. A life where her choices, her comfort, and her dignity came first. At night, she would sit on her balcony with a glass of wine, not the cheap kind anymore, and watch the city lights ripple across the water. She thought about how strange it felt to be able to buy anything she wanted, and yet what she wanted most wasn't something money could buy. Acceptance, respect, belonging. For now, she told herself patience. Martha believed still that one day David and Brittany would see her differently. One day they would understand how much she had sacrificed for them. She had no idea that day would never come. While Martha was quietly stepping into her new life, David and Brittany's perfect world was beginning to crumble. It started subtly, a casual text here, a quick call there. "Hey Mom, how are you doing? Eating okay? Need anything?" Martha smiled faintly the first few times, thinking maybe they were finally reaching out of love. But soon the pattern became obvious. The questions always circled back to money. "Rent's getting crazy out here, Mom. How are you managing? Do you still have that little apartment? Or are you thinking about moving somewhere cheaper? Medical bills are brutal these days. How do you even handle them on Social Security?" At first, Martha answered vaguely, keeping her voice soft and polite. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Everything's under control." But as the calls became more frequent and the tone less subtle, a quiet unease began to grow in her chest. One evening, Brittany called, voice sweet as honey, but just a little too rehearsed. "Martha, we've been worried about you living alone. Maybe we should sit down together and talk about your future. You know, retirement planning and all that." Martha felt the shift instantly. This wasn't care. This was calculation. The next week, David left a voicemail. "Mom, listen, Britt and I are just trying to make sure you're okay, all right? I mean, if something happened to you, we'd want to know your plans. You've written a will, right?" For 36 years, Martha had believed her value came from what she could give her time, her energy, her sacrifices. But now, sitting on the balcony of her luxury apartment, glass of wine in hand, watching the harbor lights shimmer, she began to realize something she'd never dared to consider. Maybe to them, she wasn't a mother. She was an ATM. And that thought, as painful as it was, didn't break her. It awakened her. Martha began to pull back, answering fewer calls, giving shorter replies. She wasn't rude, just guarded. For the first time in her life, she started to build boundaries, soft, invisible walls to protect herself. Because now she understood her worth wasn't tied to her money, and love without respect isn't love at all. Brittany's text came out of nowhere. "Hi, Martha. I've been thinking a lot about what I said at the wedding. I feel terrible. Can we have dinner? Just you and me." For a brief moment, Martha's heart softened. Maybe, just maybe, her new daughter-in-law finally wanted to make amends. That evening, Brittany greeted her with a warm smile at the upscale French restaurant she'd chosen. "Martha, I've been so awful," Brittany whispered, her tone dripping with remorse. "I want us to be closer. You're family now." Martha nodded politely, hiding the storm inside her. Years of sacrifice had taught her to read people's true intentions. Then came the slip. Brittany leaned forward, pretending casual interest. "By the way, I heard you gave us something special at the wedding. That box. Could we maybe talk about it? In that instant, Martha knew. This wasn't an apology. This was a strategy. She smiled faintly and set down her glass of wine and simply said, "Brittany, I don't think tonight's the right time." Inside, though, something shifted. Martha realized she was done playing their games. Late one night, Martha sat in her cozy new apartment, the soft hum of the city outside her window. Something about Brittany's apology dinner wouldn't leave her mind. For the first time, Martha decided to dig deeper. She logged into her bank's online portal and searched for public records linked to David and Brittany. It didn't take long before the truth surfaced: $186,000 in credit card debt, 2 maxed-out personal loans, a mortgage already 3 months behind. Then came the final blow. She discovered an email exchange between Brittany and David accidentally forwarded to her old address. In it, Brittany had written, "Don't worry, babe. Once Martha hands over her estate, we'll be fine. We just need to push her a little." Martha stared at the screen. The shock hit first, then came the silence. Years of sacrifice, unconditional love, and unwavering loyalty, and this was what her son and daughter-in-law thought of her. She closed her laptop, took a deep breath, and felt something shift inside. For the first time in decades, Martha wasn't the struggling, overlooked single mom anymore. She was the woman holding $62 million. She was the one holding the power, and she wasn't going to let anyone, not even her own son, use her ever again. The silence was deafening. For years, David had grown used to his mother picking up on the first ring no matter what time of day it was. But now nothing. Calls went straight to voicemail. Text messages showed read but unanswered. Invitations for brunch family dinners. Even Brittany's apology coffee date, all ignored. At first, David brushed it off. "Mom's probably busy," he told Brittany, forcing a laugh. But as days turned into weeks, panic began to creep in. Their financial situation was crumbling. Creditors were calling daily. Their mortgage company threatened foreclosure. Brittany's expensive taste hadn't slowed; if anything, it had worsened. "Why isn't she answering?" Brittany hissed one night, pacing their dimly lit kitchen. David rubbed his temples, a growing storm behind his eyes. "She knows," he whispered finally. "Somehow she knows." For the first time, David and Brittany weren't in control. For the first time, Martha held the power, and she was using silence as her weapon. The tension had been boiling for weeks, and then came the breaking point. Brittany sat cross-legged on the couch, scrolling endlessly through social media when the alert came in. A post from a luxury real estate page: sold oceanfront villa, 2.8 m, Palm Bay. Her jaw dropped. The photos were unmistakable. "David," she whispered, shoving the phone toward him. "This is Mom's name on the deed." Within hours, they had hired a private investigator. It didn't take long for the pieces to fall into place. Martha had bought a 2.8 m oceanfront villa. She had also moved 3 m into a private account, the mysterious white box from the wedding that was supposed to be theirs. David's hands trembled as he dialed her number, his voice breaking before she even picked up. "Mom, why didn't you give us the gift you planned? We needed it." There was a pause, just long enough for his heart to race. Then Martha's voice came through, calm but sharp enough to cut glass. "Because, David, respect comes before money. You and Brittany made your choice that day. Now I'm making mine." For the first time, David couldn't speak. For the first time, he realized he had lost more than just the money. For the first time in decades, Martha finally chose herself. No more silent sacrifices. No more shrinking into the background to make others comfortable. She stood before the massive floor-to-ceiling windows of her new 2.8 m oceanfront villa, the morning sun spilling across marble floors, waves crashing just beyond the balcony. This was hers, all of it: the view, the quiet, the freedom. The white box from the wedding, once meant for David and Brittany, now sat on the shelf in her living room. Inside were the untouched documents, the villa deed, the 3M cashier's check. She smiled, a mixture of peace and bittersweet vindication. "For years I gave and gave," she whispered to herself. "Now I'm finally keeping something for me." Martha traveled. She learned to paint again. She started waking up without a knot in her chest, sipping coffee as dawn broke over the ocean. Her dignity, once trampled under whispered insults and false smiles, had been reclaimed. And with it came something even more precious than money: freedom. Martha's life had transformed, but deep inside, she knew money wasn't the ultimate victory. The $62 million was freedom, yes. The oceanfront villa was peace. But the true triumph was no longer being controlled, diminished, or defined by anyone, not even her own family. One quiet afternoon, while watching the sunset paint the horizon gold, Martha made a decision. She founded Silver Shield Foundation, a charity dedicated to helping elderly people suffering from financial abuse. She used $10 million to set up free legal aid counseling services and emergency funds for seniors whose children, relatives, or caregivers exploited them. Reporters asked why she chose this path. Martha smiled softly. "I once believed my worth depended on what I gave others. Now I know my worth comes from what I protect: my dignity, my freedom, and those who have none." Letters started pouring in from strangers across the country, seniors who finally had someone fighting for them. And in that, Martha discovered something Brittany and David could never understand. Her happiness was no longer tied to their approval. Weeks had passed since the confrontation. The silence between them had grown heavier than words. Then one evening, Martha's phone lit up again, David's name flashing on the screen. She hesitated, then answered. "Mom, please, can we talk?" David's voice cracked, no longer carrying the arrogance she once knew. In the background, she heard Brittany softly sobbing. "We made mistakes," David whispered. "Can we start over? We need you." Martha took a deep breath, her gaze drifting toward the framed photo of David's wedding, the one where Brittany had asked her to stand by the bathroom wall. The memory still stung, but her heart no longer bled. Her voice was calm, steady, unshakable. "David, I was ready to give you everything, but you chose to treat me like nothing." There was silence on the other end, heavy, suffocating, final. Then came a faint, broken reply. "I'm sorry, Mom." Martha closed her eyes, letting the weight of years slip off her shoulders. This was not revenge. This was release. As she ended the call, a quiet smile formed on her lips. She finally understood. Love cannot survive where respect does not exist. The night was quiet. A soft breeze carried the salty scent of the ocean as Martha stepped out onto the balcony of her private beachfront villa. Below, the waves rolled gently onto the shore, washing away years of pain, just as they had carved the coastline smooth. She leaned on the railing, a glass of wine in her hand, and let the silence wrap around her. This was her life now, her choice, her freedom, her peace. No more begging for respect. No more shrinking herself to fit into spaces where she was never truly welcome. She had kept the villa, the millions, and most importantly, her dignity. Her phone lay silent inside. No more desperate calls. No more apologies laced with expectations. For the first time in decades, Martha belonged to herself. She whispered softly into the ocean breeze as if telling the universe her secret. Sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't getting even, it's getting everything. And with that, she smiled, not out of spite, but out of freedom. Martha's journey is a powerful reminder of one simple truth. Respect is worth more than money. She was ready to give David and Brittany everything, a 2.5 beachfront mansion and a 3M check tucked inside that little white box. But one careless, condescending moment at their wedding changed everything. Money can buy houses, cars, and luxury, but it can't buy respect, and it can't buy love. In the end, Martha chose to keep it all, not out of revenge, but to reclaim her dignity and freedom. Her story teaches us, when you take someone's love and kindness for granted, you might lose more than you ever imagined. Key takeaways. Always value the people who truly care about you. Never assume someone's generosity is guaranteed. Money can change your lifestyle, but respect and kindness decide who stays in your life. If Martha's story touched your heart, don't leave without subscribing to the channel for more powerful, life-changing stories. Liking the video if you believe that respect and love are worth more than millions. Commenting below and sharing your thoughts. What would you do if you were in Martha's shoes? Let's spread the message together. Money can be earned, respect must be given,